Before you go somewhere, and I've been doing public speaking now for the better part of, even though I look so young, 25 years. And my father was a preacher, Reverend, a preacher of the gospel for half a century. And he's still, you know, while he says he's retired, we all know that if preachers say one lie at least, it's that they retire, because they never really retire. So I've been to a lot of audiences, a lot of halls, a lot of luncheons, a lot of dinners, a lot of church services and political rallies. I've spoken in many settings. But Reverend Mooney, I have never been to a church like this. Woo! Or is it a rally? Or is it a luncheon? Or is it a conference? There is so much excitement here. I was sitting there and I was thinking, no wonder Barack Obama was elected President of the United States out of this town. So the secret, I guess the secret you have the secret formula. I wanted to say a number of things, but you really threw me off track with all the excitement from all the 16 neighborhoods that you have touched, and the enthusiasm that you all demonstrate for where you live and the love of your city. Even to go as far as using the analogy of the sun rising as we look west from Washington, D.C. That's really Chicago rising. That's pretty dramatic. That's wonderful. I wanted to say, I bring you greetings from the world's most famous community organizer, President Barack Obama. And I know that you are obviously thrilled that he is from your hometown, and that we have really begun to change direction in such an important way in this country. To Andy, thank you for the work that you do and for the choice that you made in your career to take this task on of building neighborhoods and communities along with such a great organization called LISC. Very few people, you know, you hear an acronym long enough and you think it actually is a word. And people say, well, what does LISC mean? Well, I don't know. It's just LISC. And then it was LISC Enterprise. Remember that period? I know that it is the Local Initiative Support Corporation. And the reason I know that is because I'm a planning geek. The reason I know that is because LISC did so much important work to help us turn the Bronx around. From a place of urban devastation and urban decay that was a symbol, really the symbol of the failure of urban America, to a place that has a robust economy now that is moving in the right direction. Please cross your fingers for the New York Yankees. I know you're Chicago Cubs or Chicago White Sox fans, but they're not in this year. Give me a break. Can you give another big city a break and a little love? I guess not. Some of you can. Okay. Wait a minute. If urban America is going to unite, we have to unite behind the New York Yankees. At least for today. Well, you know, when I heard the theme, when you were recognizing this outstanding citizen of Chicago, and I heard the Rocky Balboa theme, I thought of the Phillies, frankly, and Philadelphia and Rocky Balboa. But again, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you to LISC as an organization for partnering with us in turning the Bronx around. And in fact, Reverend, we built 50,000 units of housing, almost 50 new schools, 75 miles of waterfront restored, a lot of it, almost all of it, driven by neighborhood initiative and people at the local level deciding that it was time for them to take their destiny into their own hands, that government and politicians weren't necessarily going to solve their problems, and in fact, sometimes they simply got in the way, and they needed to get around them and lead. And this president gets that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. But LISC was a very important partner for us in the Bronx and in New York City, and I know the important work that it's doing here and all over the country. Let me say a word about Julia, because I'm a recent fan of Julia because I just didn't know her. If I knew her, I would have been a fan a long time ago. But I met Julia through another person from Chicago who happens to be working in the same house that I work, and her name is Valerie Jarrett. And you all know Valerie. She was here last week. She's a pillar in this community. I have to tell you that everybody that I've met walking in says, oh yeah, I'm a friend of Valerie's. I'm a friend of Valerie's. I'm a friend of... I'd like to announce today that I am a friend of Valerie Jarrett's as well. I mentioned that we start our day together and end our day together, and somebody thought that was a little awkward, but you know. But in fact, we do. We start in the Roosevelt Room with meetings about what's going on in the world and what's going on in our country and what's happening on all the important issues of the day. And we end our day in Valerie's office with a team of people that is looking at all of the constituencies across the country, looking at the cities, what came up today, what do we need to prepare for tomorrow, because every day is an opportunity to move this agenda forward. She is working very, very hard, as you know, and very dedicated always to the city of Chicago, and there is no shortage of passion and fanaticism for this city. So where's the young lady who talked about the Villarreal? The sun rising? They see the sun rising when they look west, and it's Chicago. Don't worry about it. The passion and love is there. But Julia came to the White House because I said to Valerie, we need to get a group of very smart people together who have worked in local solutions, in building neighborhoods and building cities and making them stronger and more competitive. And I need to start to work on an agenda. How do I put this thing together? It's a new office. The president has given me this charge. It's never been done before. Several administrations have tried. It's a big task to pull all these agencies together and talk about smart investment and aligning their investments to strengthen neighborhoods. How do we begin to do this? And she said, there's a couple of ladies I want you to meet. One of them was a dear friend, partner, somebody who worked in the city of Chicago in almost every manifestation of public life and private life, a real leader in our community, and she brought in Julia Stash, and it's been a friendship and a partnership ever since we met. We've been working together. The other dynamo that she brought to that room that day was somebody who has been very, very persistent about ensuring that we keep our agenda focused on neighborhood. She said the strength of our country is the neighborhood people, the folks who are building communities. All we need to do is connect them to the opportunities in their cities and their regions, their children. And it's an infectious enthusiasm that she brings to this. And since that first meeting, we are on the phone, on email, constantly talking, meeting people, figuring out solutions. Marilyn Katz, thank you for your love of Chicago and your love of cities. Okay, I know that you have till 2 o'clock here. Is that the cutoff time? Okay, so we have 11 minutes. And Lori, by the way, I know you were the president of 2016. That committee that made the wrong decision, they have no idea what they did. They missed a huge opportunity to come to the best city. The best city. I just thought about when I'm sitting there, I'm saying, wow, you know, we'll get them. We'll get them later. I have a history of working on cities, and I grew up in New York, and I love cities, and I think cities are the solution. They're the best platform for democracy and for free markets. They're the best platform for the American way of life. And our country and our nation's policies, unfortunately, didn't see that. And several administrations have scratched the surface of the potential and the promise that our cities present our nation in terms of competitiveness, in terms of building opportunity and a quality of life that's sustainable and smart, in terms of creating opportunity for a ladder of opportunity for more of the people, more of the time. Unfortunately, the national government in its leadership, I think has fallen short, and I think you'll agree that this president is the game changer. This president has changed the conversation about urban America. The very fact that he decides in the middle of his campaign to go to the nation's mayors in June of 2008, to the U.S. Conference of Mayors in Miami, and say to them, we can no longer look at cities as the problem. We need to look at our cities as the solution. We can no longer look at cities as liabilities. We need to look at cities as assets and opportunities. He began to shift the discussion, and he said to the nation's mayors, I promise you that in an Obama administration, you will have a place at the table, that the federal-local relationship will change, it will become constructive, it will become progressive, and in fact, that's what he did. In February of this year, the President announced the creation of a White House Office of Urban Affairs to lead and coordinate a national conversation about priorities, about how we invest in the nation's cities and metropolitan areas. It was a challenging, and it is a challenging discussion, and it is a huge charge. You have the good fortune of having given this country the world's most famous community organizer. You fired him up here with the neighborhoods, with the important work that you were doing in the neighborhoods of Chicago. You then present him as a candidate to the rest of the country and the other 50 states and say, we have somebody here who gets it. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow citizens, we ought to elect him as our nation's leader. And what does he do with this opportunity? He essentially turns the federal-local relationship on its head. What he has told this country is that we can no longer have policies, programs, solutions that are coming from a 30,000-foot level, from an ivory tower, coming down into communities. I know, he says to the mayors, I know, he says to the voters, that the solutions, that the innovations, that the creativity, that communities have been coming together to solve their problems at the local level, and what we need to do as a national government is to be the supporting actor, and that you are the lead actor in this play. That is the dramatic change that has happened, and you, Chicago, produced that amazing citizen. Thank you very much for the gift of the country. So, what did we inherit? What did we inherit? It's like beware what you ask for, you might get it, right? We inherit one of the deepest economic crises in our history. We inherit an economy that is on the precipice, that needs to be pulled back from the precipice and held together. And I think that history is going to look at this moment and treat it much more seriously than we even are treating it today. I don't think that folks really understand yet how close we were to the Second Great Depression. When markets start to freeze, when money is not flowing through the economy, when the banks stop lending, when city and state budgets no longer can sustain hiring police officers and teachers and firefighters and emergency service workers, and when road crews can't go out, when all the stuff that keeps us going cannot happen, we start the paralysis that happened the last time around. We were very, very close, and we're still pulling back from the precipice. But this president comes in, inherits this crisis, an environment, in my estimation, of irresponsibility to a great extent, of fiscal irresponsibility, let alone our relationships around the world that were frayed and damaged over several decades, inherits a difficult situation and begins the process of turning it around. So what have we done? The Recovery Act sends stimulus funds all around the country. It's a huge, huge undertaking, very unpopular in so many ways, but he has the courage to do that. A budget that begins to set the priorities and turn an education infrastructure in the right direction, and begin to set priorities for affordable housing, ensure a legislative agenda that begins to address the issues of health care reform and the crippling effects that an unsustainable health care system is having on families and businesses in our country. And education reform, energy reform, financial regulatory reform, fixing all these broken things. He inherits this very difficult set of circumstances. So the patient is still in the emergency room, and we're fixing it up. But the charge that we've been given is to begin planning for the future and to begin planning the communities of the future. And that's where you come in, because you have been innovating. And in spite of the absence of a rational national urban policy, in spite of states that don't necessarily think that cities are important, in spite of disinvestment and flight and sprawl, communities and cities, neighborhoods in cities have been putting themselves together, pasting together the disparate programs of government, bringing in the private sector, bringing in the nonprofit sector, bringing in the foundation community, picking themselves up as a community, bringing in the churches, the clergy, and beginning to restore neighborhoods that had been forgotten. Huge segments of the population that had been historically marginalized and left alone, kids that were undereducated, people that were unhealthy, folks that were jobless, people that were homeless, people that were essentially unprepared to compete in a modern economy. Neighborhoods and communities all around the country have figured out solutions. They've been doing this. So the president says, we don't have the answers, we need to follow your lead. And what did he do? He sets up this White House Office of Urban Affairs and fans us out across the country to visit America's cities and look at the smart solutions that people are coming up with. That's why I'm here. That's why I was here recently, and I visited a number of neighborhoods with the mayor and community leaders. That's why we've been to Kansas City and Philadelphia and Denver and Phoenix and Flagstaff and LA and Seattle. We just came from Seattle this past Thursday and Friday. We're going to Atlanta. We're visiting communities all across the country that have come up with solutions in spite of the absence of a national government supporting their efforts. What the president has charged us with doing, however, is to tie it all together, to allow you to lead the investment. At the end of the day, the federal government's investments should be led, should be driven by smart local planning. Local efforts at education, local efforts at healthcare delivery, local solutions in transportation of people and goods, local solutions in smart business, local solutions in energy conservation, in improving the environment, local solutions that have been taking place all over this country, and unfortunately the national government for too long has ignored what urban America has been doing, and you've been holding us together. The president recognizes that more than 80% of the people live in the new city metro complex. It's no longer the old industrial city of the middle of the last century, very concentrated. Cities spread. They've become regional economies. So our nation is a collection of metropolitan regions with lots of neighborhoods, with big cities, medium-sized cities, small cities, all related, and in some cases working well together, in some cases not working well together. But when the president looked across the country and visited the 50 states and talked to the American people and assessed where we were, he said, look, you know, more than 80% of the people are in metropolitan areas. More than 85% of the jobs are there. Our gross domestic product, our economy is driven by what happens in the innovations and the commerce that takes place in these metropolitan areas. So what do we need to do as a nation? We need to invest in smart ways in those metropolitan areas. And that's what we're doing as an administration right now. The geeky tech stuff that we're doing on the policy side is a bit extensive and complicated, and I could spend an hour talking about all the stuff that we're doing, but I'll narrow it down to a couple of basic baskets. One, we're looking at the regional economies and saying we need to strengthen them. So, for instance, Chicago is part of a metropolitan area that's much larger than the boundaries of the city. It has certain elements that are strong, certain elements that are weak. It's a transportation hub. It's a distribution center. It has universities and research and development that's going on in different industries. It's got a healthcare industry that is strong and is enviable. And so the question for us as a federal government is, where do we invest to ensure that the neighborhoods, that the communities, that the cities, towns, villages that are part of this metropolitan area are strong and giving everyone opportunity? Where do we make the connections between the universities and the industries and the neighborhoods and the potential workforce that's been on the margins, that hasn't had access to those industries and those opportunities and the opportunities to go up the ladder of education and get a job and provide for their families and be strong citizens and strengthen our country? How do we invest in smart ways to ensure that those things happen? And there's a whole team at the White House working on that. Then the second basket is sustainable community development. And that's about where we invest our transportation dollars and ensuring that it's done in a smart way. Right now, our transportation money, and you know we're having a national conversation about that, it's lopsided. 85 cents of every dollar goes in transportation goes to highways. Remember the bridge to nowhere in Alaska? That was part of that 85 cents going to highways, bridges, and tunnels that maybe in some states and some communities just didn't make sense, but the governor of that state decided that they were going to make that a priority for obvious reasons. We need to tip the balance. Only 15 cents going to mass transit. It doesn't make any sense if 80% plus of the people are living in metropolitan areas and we want to get them out of their cars. We got them walking in neighborhoods in a more sustainable lifestyle. So we need to tip that balance, and we're having a national conversation about that. And you know, if you keep up with the news about this, you know that it's called transportation reauthorization. It's essentially a conversation with the nation's legislature, the executive, and the rest of us about what are our priorities, the governors, the state legislatures. We ought to chime in. You, as communities, ought to say, invest more in mass transit. It makes sense. This is going to be a conversation that's going. So where's the education curve needed most or you know, pitched the highest? We've got to convince the members of Congress that it makes sense for them, even if they're in suburban, exurban, and even rural communities, to invest more aggressively in stronger metropolitan areas. Because if there is a strong Chicago metro area, there is a strong suburban, exurban, and rural area around this metropolitan area. That's what we have to do for the future. So we're working on that as well. And then we're working on the area of your expertise, where it really comes together and where people live and work and try to educate their kids, and that's neighborhood revitalization. And the question that we ask ourselves is, are we coordinating our investments to ensure that at the end of the day, we're creating the kinds of neighborhoods? You know, you've heard the president talk about the Harlem Children's Zone as a model, and then, you know, the Choice Neighborhoods Project, which you probably know well, and the Promise Neighborhoods, one based in housing choices and housing quality and neighborhood quality, the other one based on education choices and education quality and services. Bringing all of that together and bringing all the agencies to co-invest in smart ways to allow you to invest in your plans. At the end of the day, when all is said and done, we ought to be investing in smart plans that are driven by communities all across this country. That's our job. Our job is not to come up with all the answers, and the president is the first one to say that. You've heard him say it before. We don't have all the answers. Government is not the solution to everything. He recognizes that because at the ground level, at the neighborhood level, at the street level, people have been coming up with smart, innovative solutions to the challenges that we face to create a better life for all Americans. You've been doing it here in Chicago. We want to follow your lead. Let me leave you with one thought. If there's one thought about the work that we're doing and the shift, the change that has taken place, I used a couple of phrases that I think embody what you're doing. And it certainly embodies the philosophical and hopefully the practical and political shift that will occur in this country as a legacy for this presidency. And I know that you taught him all about this. The paradigmatic shift that has taken place and that we're trying to foster, the philosophical change, the approach that we're trying to ensure, is that we go from a deficit perspective to an asset perspective. Planning from a deficit perspective to planning from an asset perspective. What are the pluses? What are the opportunities? To look at problems as opportunities, to look at challenges as opportunities to grow. To go from a consumption model, right, Marilyn? A consumption model to a production model. The consumption model says, oh, you know, the retail store, let's plant it in that neighborhood. Yeah, moderate, low income, they still have to buy stuff. We'll hire a couple of their people. We'll use our contractors, and we'll put an outpost in that neighborhood. They're going to continue, they have to buy somewhere. They're going to continue to buy. The production model says, where is the community partner that can build the store, the managers that can manage the store, the suppliers that can supply the store, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the shift. I used to preach this sermon about going from pity to partnership. Pity to partnership. And I would say to the people, especially when I was a young councilman and I could say things in a more dramatic way, and I would say, we don't need pity. We need partnership. And I think this president gets that. Nobody needs a little pat on the back saying, I feel sorry for you. You know what they need? They need the tool, a toolbox. They need the skills. They need the engagement of the business community and government working together in partnership to ensure that they're engaged. And I think what catches this most is the notion that this is taking us from a transactional politics to a transformational politics. A transactional politics says, oh, you have something I need and I have something you need. Why don't we just trade it? You know, it might be a deficit on my side for a while and a few people will suffer, but you know, we traded and we both advanced our agendas. A transformational politics says, how do I add value to what you're doing and you add value to what I'm doing and nobody loses and we move forward? That's transformational. Transformational is having a vision that says, yes, that school can be transformed. Yes, those children can get on track. Yes, we can break the multi-generational cycle of failure and poverty and deficit and put it on the plus side of the balance sheet. And I'll leave you with this, and I guess if it was an evening event, it would be more appropriate because we'd probably be going to like a cocktail party or something, but it's bottoms up. Think about it, it's bottoms up. So we toast this president, we toast your community because it is about the bottom up. The president has turned the federal-local relationship on its head as it should be. That is the proper arrangement. The national government should be the supporting actor. You are the lead actor in this play. Thank you for what you're doing. God bless you. We're with you. Thank you.